Most people play sports games and video games, but barely know anything about EA Sports' history and how their journey started. EA Sports' journey began with the vision that interactive media was more interesting than passive formats, and that one day, software worthy of the minds who use it would be more important than traditional media like TV and films. In this video, we'll be looking at the rise of EA Sports and how it became a multi-billion-dollar company. Make sure you watch right till the end. Without further ado, let's dive right into the video. You can talk about EA Sports without mentioning EA. EA Sports is a division of Electronic Arts, founded back in 1982 by three former Apple computer executives, William M. Hawkins, William Bingham, and Tom Mott. The decision to build a company was made at a dinner attended by the three. They decided that their company would specialize in developing and marketing software games for home computers. EA began with an 11-person team and $5 million in capital from private investors. Initially a marketing gimmick of Electronic Arts, in which they attempted to imitate real-life sports networks by calling themselves the EA Sports Network, or EASN, with pictures or endorsements from real commentators like John Madden. It quickly grew up to become its own sub-label, releasing game series such as FIFA, NHL, NBA Live, and Madden NFL. EA's first product, released in May 1983, was a software game for the Atari 800 game console, but the market quickly shifted to the Commodore system. EA promptly adjusted. In October 1983, it released 6 more games for the Commodore 64 computer. Its Skyfox computer game for the Apple II computer became a bestseller in 1984. 2 years later, EA began developing games for the new Commodore Amiga, quickly becoming a popular computer. By 1990, EA was investing 50% of each product's development budget cost in retooling the software for it to run on different hardware systems. EA has always been flexible, developing software for whatever computer hardware was popular at the time, and then producing multiple versions of programs to run on different systems. In the early 1980s, personal computers were not widely available, and game software was still a relatively new industry, which made EA take a novel approach to software design, basing development and production on the entertainment industry rather than the software industry. EA hired software graphic artists and project managers, known as producers, instead of computer programmers. Ideas for new computer games were frequently generated by freelancers who proposed game scenarios like independent scriptwriters and submitting their scripts to Hollywood studios. If an in-house committee approved an idea, the project was assigned to a producer. More ideas were later developed in-house. Still, EA continued to regard its software developers as artists. In 1984, EA acquired marketing rights to software packages developed by smaller outside companies. EA, like a movie studio, would produce a large number of games to increase the likelihood of success. Through its affiliated labels program, and even began hiring celebrities, particularly athletes whose names and images were incorporated into the software. Football legend John Madden, basketball players Michael Jordan and Larry Bird, and chess champion Garry Kasparov are among them. And Chuck Yeager of NASA was involved in creating a flight simulation game. In terms of sales, EA never depends on third-party distributors. The company established its own sales force. EA sales representatives sell directly to retailers like Egghead, Toys R Us, Walmart, and Target. In addition to allowing for greater control over sales and inventory, using sales forces has allowed EA to better track consumer trends. EA CEO Hawkins began spending more time exploring growth, strategic plans, and day-to-day management. He began selling its software outside of the United States, and international sales accounted for $1.5 million of the company's $30 million of revenue in 1986. In 1987, EA opened a manufacturing facility in Langley, England, which became part of EA Europe. In 1987, Hawkins hired Kenneth Zerbe as the new senior vice president. Then he delegated the day-to-day management of the company to him. In September 1989, EA went public with a capitalization market of approximately $84 million. Sales were $63.5 million that year, and net income had increased from $1.3 million in 1988 to $4 million in 1989. With consistency, hard work, and smart strategies, EA had become the leading supplier of entertainment software in the United States by 1986, having developed software that could run on various computers. But this market was quite limited. Around the late 1980s, video game cartridges, which ran on exceptional players connected to television sets, proved to be a more profitable industry because most consumers had TV sets, but not a personal computer. In 1989, the market for video games was estimated to be worth $3.4 billion compared to $250 million for floppy disk computer games. It also consisted primarily of children and teenagers rather than young adults who use computers. Nintendo dominated this market, accounting for 80% of U.S. sales in 1989. And sadly, video game sales with their own compatible cartridges were really low, despite the fact that EA had begun developing software for some cartridge game companies. It didn't create games for Nintendo systems. EA refused to comply with Nintendo's terms, which included agreeing not to provide the same games to Nintendo competitors, such as Sega. After realizing that the game market was limited, EA made a significant move into the video game market by betting on an unreleased Sega game player. They didn't simply revise, but created entirely new games for the Sega Genesis machine, which was the first 16-bit video game player available in the US in 1989. This 16-bit machine was nearly twice as quick as the existing 8-bit machines, and EA worked on 8 to 10 projects for the Genesis player, each costing around $250,000 for an aggregate product development investment of $2 to $2.5 million. Although EA released its first games for Sega Genesis in June 1990, sales of the machines did not take off until 1991. Nonetheless, games for Genesis accounted for 1/4 of EA's 1990 sales. In fact, Genesis' success was due in part to the enormous popularity of the EA Sports games. EA soon produced approximately 35% of the games that would run on the Sega Genesis, allowing them to get a head start on software competition and developing games for 16-bit machines. But this time, the sales increased due to Genesis' success. EA's net revenue increased 54.8% from $113 million in 1991 to $175 million in 1992, owing mainly to a 215% increase in Sega Genesis cartridge game sales, which totaled $77 million in 1992. EA's total net revenues increased 70.4% the following year to $298 million, with sales of Sega games up 117% to $167 million. Also, after the Genesis incident, EA changed its stance and began producing games for Nintendo's 8-bit player for the first time in 1990. The Super Nintendo Entertainment System, Nintendo's first 16-bit machine, was not released in the US until June 1991. However, Nintendo reversed its policy and began allowing software developers to revise games sold to competitors so they could also run on Nintendo machines. Due to that, EA now had a larger market for the 16-bit games it developed for Sega. In 1990, CEO Hawkins left the president's position of EA and was succeeded by Lawrence Probst, who was the vice president of sales, although Hawkins still remained as chairman and leading shareholder at EA. EA, which was founded in California, was reincorporated in Delaware in 1991 and renamed Electronic Arts Incorporated, and quickly established itself as the leading independent developer of 16-bit video games. For the first time in 1992, EA's software sales for video game cartridges surpassed the sales of software on floppy disks for personal computers. The following year, the Sega format game accounted for 56% of EA's worldwide revenue, while Super NES games accounted for 18%. In 1991, EA capitalized on its leadership in sports games by launching the EA Sports brand. EA had acquired licenses for league names, teams, and logos from the NBA, the National Hockey League, the Professional Golf Association, and the National Football League over the years. Major League Baseball Players Association and the National Hockey League Players Association, John Madden Football, NHLPA Hockey, Bulls vs. Blazers in the NBA playoffs, Lakers vs. Celtics in the NBA playoffs, and the PGA Tour were among EA's most popular games. EA's year was in the early 1990s because it took great strides toward further international expansion. In 1991, EA acquired Vancouver, Canada-based Distinctive Software Incorporated and renamed the subsidiary Electronic Arts Canada Incorporated. This acquisition doubled the company's game developers to about 115 people. EA increased its substantial investment in research and development to create these sophisticated games. In 1994, the company invested 14% of its revenue in research and development, up from around 12% the previous 2 years. The Artist Workstation, a computerized means of efficiently designing software and adapting it for multiple platforms, is one of EA's innovative development techniques. They also devised new methods for combining computer animation and live-action video. The company formed a particular group in 1993 to oversee software development for the 32-bit hardware format, which included both the creation of entirely new games and extensive redesigns of existing games. Because of the complexity, each new game for a 32-bit machine would cost more than $1 million to develop. As a proactive organization that's always looking ahead, EA had other plans in the works in the mid-1990s, including interactive movies, travel-based entertainment, and access to its software via interactive cable television. The growth continued till 2005. EA Sports signed a 15-year deal for ESPN to be integrated into EA Sports video games from 2K Sports and Sega. Its use of the ESPN license had steadily increased throughout the agreement. Early ESPN license usage by EA included ESPN Radio and a sports ticker in titles such as Madden NFL, NBA Live, Tiger Woods PGA Tour, and NCAA baseball and football. ESPN now includes streaming podcasts, text articles including content previously only available to ESPN Insider subscribers, and ESPN Motion Video, such programs as Pardon the Interruption. EA Sports, being the most played sports video game in the world, has listened to its customers by partnering with several football games to bring an authentic experience to their customers. Also improved over time by expanding the global community, developing innovative football experiences across new platforms, committing to all levels of the sport, including grassroots, and accelerating the advancement of the women's game. That's how EA Sports expanded to a multinational company. Have you ever played one of the games developed by EA Sports? Let us know in the comments below. And thank you for watching. Don't forget, subscribe and activate notifications for more inspiring videos. Cheers!